Hello, Clemens. How are you?
Hey, I'm fine, thanks, Joan.
Thanks. We start the interview, and
Uh-huh.
I asked you, and we make some kind of conversation. What have been your musical reference since the beginning of your career as a composer, or right now?
Hmm.
What kind of music do you prefer, and do you usually listen to frequently?
Yes, that's growing up, and if I'm because when I have to when I refer to music, I have to refer also to a music with which you grew up, and this is not always fantastic music, but that's the music that your ears are trained to. Is of course I was not really absolutely trained with just classical music. So maybe I was, as many of our colleagues, we were also listening to a lot of rock music. And as I was born in the middle of the Alps, the rock music of the late 60s and the early 70s arrived in the Alps somewhere 10 or 12, 10 years later. So when I was, when I was a kid, 12, 13, this was kind of a music that was one which really took me, yeah. And at the same time, it was also some stuff of the classical music. So it was a kind of a strange mixture. And then after getting deeper into the music, and there was also jazz extremely important. Never doing jazz, never doing rock music, yeah, because I had too much as a kind of respect, because every kind of music, every type of music is not just music, but is a kind of a life form. So when I would say me as a contemporary composer, that's a different life. That's my life is a life of always questioning, is a life of always having this kind of skepticism, but a very, let's say, it's a skepticism with a lot of joy, yeah. And maybe a jazz musician has a totally different life, which I do not really know as it is, and I would say it's the same with rock music or any other type of music. And of course, a music which was not very close to me, but when you grow up in the Alps, it is just something that you hear. Is this kind of? It's not folk music. It's a kind of sometimes perverted, sometimes disorganized folk music, and all this kind of also marching bands, marches, etc., etc. This is just something that you always hear, yeah. Um, which then made me also, do works which are referring to this kind of, maybe unpleasant training, yeah, because it is a training of me, yeah. But it
Yeah.
was not. It's not a music where I'm saying, wow, it's great. But nevertheless, every type of music has also. And this is what I found out: a kind of an intelligent and oral intelligence, yeah. Thus, it might be also like marches, for example, be extremely manipulative, yeah. But they also have this kind. It's not an intelligence, but they have this kind of power to make you manipulated. And this is something which, as you know, is something which is very important for me. So to deconstruct or to have a kind of a research. Why is it, or how does manipulation work? And also then in later works, how does sadness work? How does comic work, etc., etc. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Mm.
And so we continue. With a career already consolidated and that can be analyzed from a long time perspective, could you say if there have been many changes in your music, has a strong evolution, or do you conceive it from its beginning until now as a continuous and without any breaks?
Uh, Büchner said, if somebody could look into his brain, I have no idea. At least, so I think it is like this. Composers have no idea of what they really do. Yeah. Uh, so it's a hard question. Yeah. But of course, I have an idea. I think that there were some pieces in the last, let's say, when I started to compose, yeah, which were extremely important for me, and which made some kind of a change. Yeah, and I'm not talking now about the first pieces that I did
Yeah,
as a youngster, but there is a piece which I do not like, but which by not liking it and but because I went into a certain direction as far as I could, and I saw what I didn't want to make. Yeah? And I saw all the weaknesses, and I saw also all the what I forgot. Yeah? And this was a very important piece. Thus, I would. It's in my catalog, but if somebody asks me if I want to play it, maybe I'm also judging it in a wrong way, because I judge it because out of my let's say development. Yeah, but it was important. And then there was also a piece where I did something, maybe not in the full let's say perspective of evidence and in the full knowledge of what I really did. This was a piece called Variations and Old Themes, also Variationen und alte Themen. It's a quartet, very long quartet, where I asked questions which are still important now in a totally different way. Questions about making music out of its sources, yeah, out of the what we call in German Bedingungen, out of the what is Bedingungen in English, the groundings, yeah, and not inventing music from somewhere else, but from the very groundings of sound, and much later then also from perception and from how of conceiving and making sense. Yeah? And this is a piece where now, from a very late perspective, and it was done in 1996, then where I see that I started to research in a certain direction. Of course, this was it's not a one-way track, yeah, because there were a lot of different things also which you pass, or where I went into deeply. But this was a kind of a start, yeah? And maybe if you look on my works out of a certain perception, you could say that, not starting from this piece, but that this is a kind of a research which is making sense still until now. But there were of course steps where I developed, or I found out things which I didn't see in the pieces before, etc., etc. And this is, but somehow, you know, taking the groundings of instruments and sound, taking the groundings then a few years later of perception, then the groundings of also emotive aspects, like in the songbook, or then a few years later in sad songs, and now having the groundings of, let's say, our whole, what I called in a talk and also in an essay, the understanding of music, yeah, and inventing music out of these groundings, yeah. So the theme is then developed from this. This is something where you could say that maybe this is a track, yeah. But maybe I'm totally wrong, because maybe somebody sees it totally different, and because I also heard, no, each of your pieces is totally different, and even when I'm making, and I like to make cycles, yeah, or work groups, yeah, and each of the pieces is totally different. So this is maybe something where, if you ask me this question in this way, I could say it's like this, maybe.
Great,
yeah.
Interesting. Can you talk about your Nerone project, one of your most ambitious works, and one that you have worked on for many years?
Yeah. I think for every composer at some point there is the question, and for me extremely, because when I'm talking about understanding in the listening, then I'm talking about the projection of an input, an oral input, which is then in our mindset projected in all our senses. So on tactility, on the eyes, on the nose, so on odeur, and on what we see, etc., etc. Yeah? And of course, then a project is maybe important for every composer, where these aspects all make sense in a way so that they are not added onto each other, but they are working always together. And Nerone is maybe the first, it's not the first step, but it's the first thing, or the first project, where I was developing something where the aspects of what we normally call a music theater are brought together, but not in the, I would say, in the well-known music theater aspect, but in the aspect that each layer is extremely influencing the other, and there is always a deep communication. And it's also a work not on theater, but about representation, about how things are represented on stage, where reality is. And this is what I found out in the, and this was kind of, so I'm doing this project, I think, since 15 years, yeah? And it was unfortunately cancelled once, and now we are trying to get it maybe done in the next 20 years, or 5 years, I don't know.
It's 3 parts, no?
It's 4 parts. It's 4 parts, and these 4 parts are more or less, and this was extremely important for me when I saw this, based on how the life of the Roman Emperor Nero is told. Yeah, not about what it really was, but how it was told. Because in this kind of biography, we see that Nerone, as an emperor, as an actor, as a writer, as a sportsman, yeah, is always changing the realities. And so we are always on, like what we also see in media and in the whole media process, that the reality is never fixed on something that we see, but on how it's looked at and how it is described and what it represents. Yeah? And so the whole project is always a work on representation, on how something is represented, and at the same time that all the representations are real. Yeah? So in some kind of aspects there is no scenery, because every musician, every instrument is part of the scenery, but they are also representing something, and this is the very complicating process to make something which is real, a scenery, and a scenery something which is real. Yeah, and this is what the whole process or the whole project is about. And with the text writer Lisa Spalt, we did a lot of project, and this is some kind of that we do music and text, and also then there is also integrated visual aspects by some kind of a photo film, yeah, where everything is at the same time reflecting and emotive, and reflecting emotion, reflecting narration, narrating reflection, etc. And this is it sounds all maybe complicated, but this is where I'm on, yeah. And so it's a very, let's say, I would say, as I know the score now, very strong and very also sometimes of course brutal and delicate, and sometimes also close to kitsch piece, which is researching on how we feel, how we see the world, how we represent the world, and all projected on this, or driven out from 4 main let's say events of the Vita from Nerone.
Okay, perfect. Great.
And hopefully we might have a chance to do it in the next years. And there are interesting talks, but it's a, as you know, it's a project for about 24 musicians, and
it's
with the stage
screens.
Well, this is something where we are working on, and which depends on also about with whom we then definitely do it. Yeah. But yes, of course, you know, and as you know, it's not easy to put something on stage like this.
Good. We continue. Clemens, can you explain your ideas about compositional resynthesis of perception, sensation, and feeling that should bring together the trinity of listening, compression, and composition?
Yes, I will try to do it in a short way, because I wrote some articles and and there are also some interviews also in the internet where I'm talking about this. And one of the first one was called Hören, Verstehen, Komponieren, also listening, understanding, composing. And so what the theory, or how I perceive myself when I listen, I get an what I said before, I get an input, and the sound or whatever it is that I hear is immediately projected on all my senses. Yeah, and this is also that I hear that the sound is high. No sound is high, but I project it onto my onto the space experience. A sound is spicy, it's our tongue. A sound is bright, the eyes. A sound is maybe weak, a body feeling, or it's rough. And when I take this all together, I call it, I understand the sound event. Yeah, and I can just, and I'm absolutely sure about this, I can just understand it by this kind of projection. Yeah? And what I do is that I turn this process upside down, that I take the sensations that we all have, yeah? And I'm making, let's say, relations between these sensations, and then I project them on specific sound elements that are, of course, driven out of the idiomatics of, for example, instrumentation, etc. So, yeah, and this is also something because we all maybe all not, but within a cultural, let's say, family, yeah, we share the same experiences, or let's say experience that might be congruent. Yeah. So if I'm saying, think of a very bright and sharp sound, yeah, I think that a lot of us humans, yeah, which share more or less the same experience, yeah, will not have the same sound, of course, but we have we have a kind of a number of sounds which which then also give a lower kind of a differentiation, yeah, and this is what I'm and so I can build my material out of this, and then I can make syntheses between layers, yeah, and create out of a bright sound with, let's say, something hollowness, yeah, something which is somehow either not existing or not existing in this way. And this is the way that where I can refer on how we understand sound, and what we also in our cultural process, the experience that we share, yeah, as we share that wham ba bam is a kind of rhythm, or which we can name it, yeah, either to a march or to a funeral march or to whatever, yeah. So our body is also then making more or less the same things, and I can then recompose them. So I know that this rhythm carries a big semantic aspect, yeah, and the work on semantics is something that I'm sure is very, very important, because every sound is a carrier for these semantics. Even brightness or tradition or a C major chord is somehow carrying semantic possibilities, not specific semantic semantics, but semantic possibilities. And working on them is extremely important. And by turning the process of understanding upside down, I can resynthesize this, which makes clear how we understand and this is what this is one of the paradoxes that that makes me nervous, that I can make an understanding clear by experiencing, not by a brain process, but by experiencing something, which I think is also then somehow the political aspect that I'm always talking about, the politics of experience and perception, because if we have the experience that we can redefine semantics, we also have the possibility not to believe what is said to us, or that we can be skeptic without this kind of how do you call it, falte, I don't know what it is, I'm skeptic. No, but we can be skeptic in this kind of joyful way, that we always prove, is this important, is this the same for me, yeah. And this is something which art, and this is one thing that I believe, that we humans made art, yeah, so that we can redefine the world that we learned to perceive in a different way, and that makes the world the possibility to change somehow the world. Of course, I'm not naive. Yeah? We will not change the world, yeah? But we give the possibilities to change the world in the aspect of experience, and this is aesthetic experience, but which is not an aesthetic experience only, but also an experience of as humans, of our society, of our culture, of also the world. So we are not living in a world, but we are the world that we live in, yeah? And the world lives in us, and we have to also see this kind of this aspect that we are not part, so that we are, no, we can divide us from this world, and in our perception this is pre-formed, and this is what I'm working on.
Interesting. Continue. In your compositions, sometimes you refer to banality. How do you define this concept, and which role has it in your music and thinking?
I define banality as something that is so clear to us that we do not really perceive it. Yeah. So if you go on the street and if you see a red light, you react. You do not perceive the structure of the red light. Which kind of red is it? What is the structure of the glass? But you just react. Yeah? Also, when you're driving a car and someone makes mark, you react and you don't listen. That's a C sharp and it's a little too, and maybe, you know. And this is banality. Yeah, and this you can also say this to music. Yeah, we react on music. Yeah, but we don't listen to music, etc., etc. And banality is for me important, because these are the very, very fundaments of our social and cultural life, which we do not question. And the more banal something is, the less it is questioned. And this is also why I'm referring to this banality, because I want to work on these unquestioned questions. Yeah, because we have to ask all these questions. Yeah. Also, and these are not, those simple questions just like red light, but of hierarchies. You know, we are simply referring to hierarchies without thinking, because we are so trained in hierarchies. Yeah, we are, and to ask, and this is also then, of course, necessary and possible in our art form. Let's say music plus or whatever it is. Yeah, because. Music is also kind of a representative of the way of thinking in our society. Yeah? And as long as we think in strong hierarchies, yeah? As for example, of course, the tonal music did, and seeing the tonal music, then I see all the strength of breaking out of these hierarchies. And it was not just Beethoven who was the first who really was fighting against this. Yeah, and so, and these are then, and I see the banality of tonality always be fighted against in the great, as I see it, great tonal music. Yeah? And we can now say the hierarchies of rhythm, the hierarchies of specific sound elements. And these are all, these are so profoundly building us as subjects that I need to work on them, because it also then asks the question, what kind of subject am I if I do not question all the things which I'm made of? My subjectivity and individuality is a kind of a fake, yeah, because it's not me. It's done by so many. I'm trained to be this kind of subject, yeah? And when I start to question what I'm made of, I might, slowly develop something which might go into a process of individualization of what philosophy or somebody else might call subjectivity. Yeah? But this is a process, yeah? And I do not have a subjectivity. Yeah? And it's not given to me, because just all what is given to me is a kind of a training and learning process. And this is why banality, or I'm also forcing it into this cruel word banality, yeah, because we have to see that everything that we do is somehow banal, because it's set in our society, yeah, and it's clear, it's too clear, yeah, and at the moment when we question it, it's no more clear, yeah. Then a red light is absolutely not clear. Why do I react on the red light? Why is a red light why is it so trained that I'm doing like this? And green, what and I'm questioning all with one single element. I'm questioning all our cultural settings and all our also our physical settings, yeah, you know, red and blood and blah blah blah.
Etc.
And then I have one single element maybe, and I can work on the whole world. And this is why I'm strengthening it to banality. Yeah, also to put the ball onto a certain point, and then, you know, not to so that the working method is also then different, and forcing me into sincere or maybe even stronger questionings.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, we have half an hour. We have
That's
time.
good. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
good. Okay. Tell me, what are your influences in your music from cinema, literature, painting, etc.? Other arts different from sound that are very present in many of your compositions. For example, they have it inspired your music. They are quoting it in its title, are mixed it with sound as in interdisciplinary work, etc.
Yeah. Okay, at first I have to excuse all the great artists, which I do not name now, because I forget them maybe. Yeah. But there are some, let's say,
Preferences, favorites.
not favorites, but obsessions.
Obsession.
Yeah? Because some things are not leaving me. Yeah, there is an obsession, not obsession, but there is a big interest. For example, or let's start with Marcel Proust. Yeah, who does something which is fantastic, and I've never seen something before him, that you make art by reflecting art. Yeah, the same with Musil. Yeah, der Mann ohne Eigenschaften, the man without qualities, I think it is. In English, I don't know the English title. Yeah? And Michel Leiris, as for me very important also in the aspect of being an ethnologist, and at the same time being a writer. Yeah, so and also being on the same track like this. Yeah? And very important for me in this aspect was also Claude Lévi-Strauss. Yeah? Because this was one of the far away from everything that I could use. Yeah, but on seeing how somebody defaults structures of something which is very banal, a family structure, yeah, but defaults it in possible meanings. I don't know, I'm not an ethnologist, if this is still valid or still true. Yeah, this was not interesting for me, but interesting for me was taking a grounding situation of our lives and defolding it into the structure, and what does it mean, and how, and then also having the narrations of the myths, yeah, and seeing how these are bound to these simple things. So a little bit about literature, and I forgot tons of things. Yeah, maybe not for this. For example, for specific pieces, like for Comic Sans and for Sad Songs, there were of course Comic Sans I made because I wanted to work on materials in a way so that it's not like this so serious, you know, because this kind of, and I wanted to have this kind of view on the materials from an ironic, from an ironic and humoristic way. It's not funny. A comic is not funny, and a Comic Sans is absolutely not funny, but it works with funny strategies. And there, of course, you know, I'm referring to literature. So there is the early romantics, like some theater plays by Tieck, etc. And then, of course, I have a big fable for Buster Keaton, yeah, and also for the essential and very life-based, not funny things of Buster Keaton, yeah. And also, when you remember what I'm talking about, Nerone, Buster Keaton always playing with the representation. Is he Buster Keaton or is he his role? Yeah. And there is one scene in Buster Keaton in the West, which is one of my most favorite ones, where it really comes to the point, yeah, where he's playing with his role and with being Buster Keaton in the film, or Buster. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah. Jean-Luc Godard is, you know, always somebody, because it's a way of making film by defolding how a film is made, and we don't have to. And also from the emphatic aspect, for me also Eisenstein was always very important, because it's so massive and so important and so extreme in how he develops the pictures that I learned a lot about, also timing. Yeah. Oh, and as you see, I don't talk about music at the moment. And then, of course, I'm Austrian. Wittgenstein, questioning language, questioning understanding. Maybe not so much on the Tractatus, because I'm not into the logics, but in the Blue Book and in the Brown Book, that's and in the Philosophischen Betrachtungen, it was always, and it's a life-based somehow philosophy. I'm not reading philosophy in the aspect of if it's right or wrong. It's just how it triggers me. And Wittgenstein was always triggering me quite a lot. And there are a lot of other philosophers which are not coming into my mind at the moment. Yeah.
I remember also, I think, the Tiziano and Justin quartet.
There are Tizian is always a painter which was, because how developing the paintings out of the colors, as well as the late Rembrandt, where you don't paint, but it's somehow how it's emerging out of the color. It was always fantastic for me. And the Macias story is also, of course, something which was it's a kind of an obsession, because you have the story of Macias, and then you see, and this is something that art can do, and it's very hard to live with this, that you have the most cruel thing in the most beautiful way. So the skin is ripped off Macias, and you see the most great painting that you could ever see. Yeah, and when Apollo is sitting aside, he is well painted and everything, but it's realistic and it's not interesting. But painting is in the moment where the canvas, let's say, opens the flesh of this person, and this is so cool. And it's maybe the same. Another obsession is Bacon. Yeah, also Bacon, because it is something. Also, how he puts things into, or let's say a pope, into the picture. Yeah, and also referring to other arts. Yeah, and to Velázquez, etc., etc. And then, of course, this kind of bringing together a space, and then in the modeling in the space, but it's always a canvas, so it's always flat, and it has a strength which is just amazing. And there are, of course, hundreds of other painters which are now may forget. Of course, it's the same with Grünewald with because it's also in the crucifixion of the Isenheimer altar, where you see, where you smell the flesh, where you feel physically parts of the pain, at the same. It's totally structured, and having this kind of connection between a structured artwork and the sensuality which you really feel. It's also something, in some of Schiele's very rough drawings, you just can even touch the body, and also, because it's just I was just in Paris, and I was in the Picasso Museum, and there was one portrait, giving us the possibility to see a face from 3 or 4 different dimensions or sides at the same time, perspectives. It's just so immense, because this is something that is my let's say thinking in polyphony. So I'm not doing polyphony of having layers which are going apart, but so that I can have one object, seeing it from different sides. And for this, for example, also maybe the construction of Rodin's, how he felt a sculpture would be, so that or also the Michelangelo sculptures, the slaves also, because they are not finished, but also this, if they are finished or not, it doesn't matter. But you see at the same time, and this is also with Rodin, it's very important, you see the material, and the material is not neglected, which is maybe a little bit like this in the Pietà, which is so fantastic because it is neglected, and you never think that it's marble, because it's so it's so pure, and it's but on the one hand side, then you see this is a kind of, how do you say, it's where the blood goes through a vein. Yeah. No, it's not a vein, but it's the marble, which has a color. And this is so fantastic, and unfortunately you're not able to see this because it's just too far away. Yeah.
Too much tourists.
Yeah, it's too much tourist there. Yeah. But this is also some kind of an obsession. And I'm always, also all my living colleagues, they have to excuse myself because I'm not will not talk about living colleagues, except maybe, there's a tradition in music, which is for me very important, which goes maybe, this is of course the German-Austrian tradition. Yeah. So if I'm talking about Bach, Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven, and then I'm talking very much about Schubert, because Schubert is very hard to understand, but for sad songs, Schubert was very important. Yeah. And then of course maybe if I forget some of them, and Mahler, Schönberg, Weber, and Berg, and then for me Nono, Stockhausen and Lachenmann are the three composers which from, let's say, from the first area of contemporary music, which were massively important because they just went into a world which was with Schönberg, with Stockhausen and Lachenmann, which was totally unpredictable and not foreseeable, and with Nono, because he's working on so easy topics, just a single note with a crescendo or not a crescendo, but finding structures to make a totally unknown music, but simply, as Stockhausen said, his notes are always saying like this, but this is not true, yeah, and doing the total opposite than everybody did in this time, not inventing new material, yeah, but working on in a new way on the old material, which was very important for me, yeah. And then, what my growing up, the sound world and the physicality of some parts at first of jazz. So I have some obsession on Coltrane, on mostly the late Coltrane, and on Eric Dolphy and Elvin Jones and this. Yeah, so these are very close to me because there is a kind of an energy and a dimension which is extremely important for me. Yeah? And let's say a few, things which made me think when I was now didn't make me think when I was a kid, but made me think about me as a kid. I have a big obsession, or it's a kind of a big, let's say, audial friendship to Keith Moon from The Who, because what he did is something that I later then found out in Mozart string quartets, that you have the energy of the music not in the foreground but in the background, and there are some recordings he's always playing solo by a company, yeah? And this is fantastic. And of course very important is how you can treat sound in the way what, for example, then Hendrix and Joplin did with their instruments. And one thing totally different, the very late albums, the American albums of now I don't get the name. Why don't I get the name? Johnny Cash, where you see the perfectness of imperfection in this kind of voice. I don't always like the arrangements. Sometimes they are a little too fat for me. Yeah, but some of them are really good. But in singing and in presenting the voice in this kind of imperfection and being so precise, yeah, is something that is somehow emotive, yeah, and somehow he also goes back into something very easygoing, yeah. And what I learned also from this, and this is something where we have to be maybe also critic in our way of making music, because I'm criticizing, of course, every pop and rock and jazz music because it's a style, but we also have a style. And when I'm trying to write music, I do really to not to have a style, because the style is something which is so boring, yeah. And it's so hard for me as a composer to get out of what is, of our tradition of contemporary music, and not, we can also go, okay, I go a little bit to pop music and then I use pop sounds. That's not what I'm thinking of, yeah. But to find something which is a different planet, which has a different making sense. Yeah, and there is my obsession for Duchamp, who said, my taste, I am not interested in my taste. I know it. It's boring. So I have to do something which I do not know if I like it, and maybe I learn to love it somewhere. Yeah, and this is something which maybe is all, you know, that brings all these artists together, that they do something where I'm not sure if they really liked it. I'm not sure if Beethoven liked the Hammerklavier Sonate. Yeah, liking, but it was necessary. Of course, he liked it. Yeah, of course. Yeah, but so a necessity, and Schoenberg, of course, we know it. Yeah, I don't know if he liked his first pieces, you know, because it was maybe too strange. Yeah, but it was necessary. Yeah, and this is something where I'm thinking in the position where we are now, with all the overkill of media and pictures and sounds, etc. That we really have to find, let's say, islands, or we have to find territories, where we are not totally preformed, but which we find by questioning our preformedness. And this is maybe, and now I can start again and name maybe 100 of other composers and artists and filmmakers, and
We go to the next question. Okay. How would you define or characterize the current context of music? Much more fragmented than before, where schools and the styles were clear and more limited. For example, the serialist school. Do you identify with some of the current tendencies in music? Do you see the current situation of contemporary music very different from the previous one? What do you think about the use of technology that is very present today in several composers? What is your relationship with it? And do you see positive things in it, negative things, or what's both things sometimes? It's a general question.
Yeah. Maybe let's start with the term of style. Yeah. When I say I don't want to have a style, I don't want to follow my taste. Yeah. It also means that when I see a style coming up, like we can name it just the style number X, then I'm getting a little okay. Yeah. Of course, we are all, we are in a context, yeah, and this is absolutely clear, yeah. But let me call it like this: if I get the energy, somebody wants to go out of his limitations, of maybe on a style or on a context where he or she is born into as a composer or whatever, yeah, I'm happy. Yeah? If I don't get this feeling, I'm unhappy. Yeah? Because in music, I don't want to listen to a style or, oh, it's quite well done in this kind of area, or it's not so well done. Yeah? I want to hear a specific sense making of a person in sound. Yeah? And of course, this is absolutely subjective. Yeah? And some are closer to me, some are not closer to me. Yeah? For me, it was always interesting to listen to music which is not close to me, because when you everything which is close to you, I know it. Yeah, I know why it is close to me. Blah blah blah. Yeah? And one of the very of the examples which always makes me, questioning is Stravinsky. Yeah, because I know it's a fantastic composer, but it's not close to me. Yeah, and so I'm always confronting me again with Stravinsky. Yeah. By knowing that he will not get into my body fully. Yeah? Technology, of course, I would say I'm also using technology, but far from using technology from technology side, but from taking technology as a media which is at the same time reflected, let's say researched. So researching in technology, with technology, and then open it. Yeah, and of course some technologies are so in a cage or in a box that it is very hard to reflect them. Yeah, because some parts of the let's say
it's programming,
and so it's very hard to
to open
to make it explode. Yeah, and this is what we see in the computers, in our use of computers. Yeah, and so this is also something maybe where I'm technology-wise not clever enough at the moment. Yeah, but I'm seeing possibilities also to work on this. So also with the project I'm making now with Earcam and with two other pieces with keyboards and filterings and convolutions stuff, where I do not play samples, but samples are transformed by various media. So what I do not really appreciate really is kind of doubling, because because we can have a canvas or a screen with video. It has to make sense. Yeah, of course. I know that it's not with the first sip, will not make sense. Yeah, and I think it's absolutely crucial and necessary also to find different possibilities how to make stuff with performative art, etc., etc. Yeah? I have to admit that in some ways, contemporary music is a little blind of what the other arts have been done. Maybe when you go to performance stuff, and if you do not know the performative art from, let's say, at latest from the Dadaists until the 1970s, yeah, maybe you would, if you know all this stuff, maybe you would not go in this easygoing direction, and thinking that just being performative is great, yeah, because when we see performative artists. And what they did, they were so existential, and they were so going to the sources and the groundings of humanity and of society, that sometimes it looks a little to me as being a kind of childish play. Yeah? And this is something which maybe is also a little due to our media aspect, because we think that everything is present at the same time, yeah, and that things might have no history. And the question of the ending of history. No, the history didn't end, because it's written in our bodies. Yeah, and if I do not reflect myself and how I'm done, and we are also done by all these artists, yeah, then I'm forgetting something. And this is due for performance art, this is also due for all the multimedia stuff, and this is also due for music theater or whatever. Yeah? And what I love and what I appreciate is composers who are somehow doing something outside, being not in a style, having no label. Yeah? And I would love if I could say from myself, I have no label, yeah, and I'm not labeled as being, yeah, maybe being labeled as me, but nothing else, yeah, but not. And this is also something which is extremely necessary for me, that no piece is a second version of the first piece, yeah. Which is and now we have to talk about production modes, because if you have to write for making a living and you have to write 7 or 8 pieces a year, then you have no other chance to than to repeat yourself, which is a different stuff. And but somehow, yeah, this is something that I would love to have, yeah. And that if you listen to a piece, you might get, after quite a lot of pieces from mine, that these may be from me. But maybe you don't at first here listen, it's him, but it's something different. Just, we have to, 1 minute or 5 minutes, you have to cut it. Yeah. And this is something where I have to say, that I don't think that contemporary music is so, verified or differentiated. Yeah? Of course, there are some very conservative ones and blah, blah, blah. Yeah? But if we try to do something as Lévi-Strauss did, if we go to the structures, we sometimes have to question, for example, if contemporary music is not, as film music, full of rhetoric gestures, but unknown rhetoric gestures. If maybe contemporary music is not still a music sometimes, and I'm not talking about all contemporary music, but sometimes that that a lot of hierarchies are still valid. And that there is too less questioning of hierarchies. maybe then we see, yeah, that on the structural basis, yeah, we see our society mirrored, yeah. And what I would love to, and this is what maybe I'm also doing, but this is a question that you maybe have to answer then. That is what I'm trying to talk about with the young colleagues, which I'm be happy to work with. Yeah, that we have to not mirror our society, but we have to question how we mirror our society. And when an artist does this, I'm happy, if I like it or not. And there is a lot of stuff which I do not like because it's not close to me. Yeah, but I'm absolutely fond of it, and I'm saying, wow, yeah, this is something I don't like it, but it's great. Yeah? And this is something that, yeah, in this whole process of culture, of working on the culture, would be maybe somehow a little bit more necessary. Let's say it like this. Yeah.
That's perfect, Clemens. I think the answer, your answer was very complex and rich, and for the next generations and for the context of today's music. I think we can end the interesting interview.
Okay.
Interview.
Thank you.
And
Wonderful.
thank you very much for all.
Thank you for the interview. Thank you very much. Yeah.